Amy's hands trembled slightly as she clicked the confirm booking button on the travel website. She had spent weeks planning every detail of this trip, a carefully curated itinerary of Paris, Rome, and Barcelona. It was her way of saying thank you to her parents, who had stood by her during the most challenging periods of her life. Her mother, Anna, and her father, Robert, had always been her biggest cheerleaders, offering emotional and financial support as she navigated the unpredictable world of freelance graphic design. This trip was her chance to give something meaningful back to them. The idea had come to her during a particularly sleepless night. Work had been piling up, and Amy's stress was through the roof. She remembered sitting in her tiny studio apartment, surrounded by sketches and empty coffee mugs, when she suddenly thought about her parents. She hadn't seen them in months, save for their occasional Zoom calls. Even then, their faces had seemed tired, their voices less lively than she remembered. Amy realized that her parents, who had spent their entire lives working tirelessly to provide for her and her younger brother, had never had a proper vacation together. Sure, there were the occasional weekend trips to nearby lakes or mountains, but they'd never experienced the kind of luxurious getaway they deserved. Amy spent the next few weeks poring over travel blogs and reviews, meticulously crafting an itinerary that would give her parents the perfect European experience. The trip would begin in Paris, where they would stay at a boutique hotel with a view of the Eiffel Tower. From there, they would explore the romantic streets of Montmartre, indulge in wine and cheese tastings, and enjoy a river cruise on the Seine. Next was Rome, with its ancient ruins, breathtaking architecture, and, of course, a guided tour of the Vatican. Finally, they would end in Barcelona, soaking up the vibrant culture, feasting on tapas, and marveling at Gaudi's masterpieces. Amy spared no expense, even though it meant tightening her budget for months. She had scrimped and saved, cutting back on takeout and foregoing nights out with friends. It had been worth it, though. The look of surprise on her parents' faces when she handed them the printed itinerary was priceless. "This is unbelievable, Amy," Anna had said, tears welling up in her eyes. "You didn't have to do this." "Of course I did," Amy replied, beaming. "You've done so much for me. This is just a small way to say thank you." Robert had grinned and pulled Amy into a bear hug. "We're so proud of you, kiddo. You're amazing." For a moment, Amy felt like she was floating on air. The joy and gratitude on her parents' faces made every sacrifice worthwhile. Over the next few days, they talked endlessly about the trip, excitedly discussing what to pack and which sights they were most looking forward to seeing. Amy couldn't wait to hear all about their adventures when they returned. As the departure date approached, Amy noticed a slight shift in her mother's tone during their conversations. Anna seemed less enthusiastic, her responses more curt than usual. When Amy asked if everything was okay, Anna assured her that it was, chalking it up to pre-travel nerves. Amy dismissed her concerns, thinking her mother was simply overwhelmed by the excitement of the trip. 1 week before her parents were set to leave, Amy received a call from her mother. Anna's voice was unusually casual as she said, "Oh, by the way, we invited Rachel to join us instead. We thought you wouldn't mind." The words hung in the air, sharp and disorienting, like the aftermath of a slap. Amy's first reaction was disbelief. "What?" she managed to stammer after a moment. "You invited Rachel?" "Yes," Anna replied matter-of-factly. "She's been having a tough time lately, and we thought it would be nice for her to get away. You know how much she's been struggling since her breakup." Amy's mind raced. Rachel was her best friend, or at least she had been. Lately, their friendship had been strained, their conversations growing shorter and less frequent. Amy had chalked it up to Rachel's heartbreak over her recent breakup, but now she wasn't so sure. Inviting Rachel to join a trip that Amy had planned and paid for felt like a betrayal, no matter how Anna tried to spin it. "I'm sorry," Amy said, her voice tight. "But this doesn't make any sense. I planned this trip for you and Dad. Why would you invite someone else without asking me?" Anna sighed as if Amy were being unreasonable. "We thought you'd understand. Rachel's like family, and we didn't think it would be a big deal. It's not like you were planning to come with us." "That's not the point," Amy replied, struggling to keep her emotions in check. "This was supposed to be a gift for you two. I put so much time and effort into planning this, you could have at least asked me first." Anna's tone turned defensive. "We appreciate everything you've done, Amy, but you're making this into a bigger issue than it needs to be. Rachel will only add to the experience. Besides, she's covering her own expenses." Amy wanted to argue further, but she could tell it was pointless. Her mother had already made up her mind, and any attempt to change it would only lead to more conflict. After hanging up, Amy sat in silence, staring blankly at the wall. The joy and pride she had felt just days ago had been replaced by a gnawing sense of hurt and betrayal. Over the next few days, Amy tried to push the incident out of her mind, telling herself that it wasn't worth dwelling on. But as the departure date drew closer, her feelings of resentment only grew. She couldn't understand why her parents, who had always been so supportive, would make a decision that felt so dismissive of her efforts. And Rachel's involvement only made things worse. How could someone who claimed to be her best friend agree to something so thoughtless? When the day of the trip finally arrived, Amy received a curt text from her mother. "We're heading to the airport now. Thanks again for everything. Love you." There was no mention of Rachel, no acknowledgement of the tension that had arisen between them. Amy replied with a simple, "Have a great trip," her fingers trembling as she typed the words. As she watched her parents' journey unfold on social media, Amy's heart sank deeper with each post. The trip she had so lovingly planned had become a painful reminder of her own exclusion. Little did she know, this was only the beginning of a betrayal far more tangled than she could have imagined. Amy had always loved scrolling through Instagram for travel inspiration, but now, every photo her parents and Rachel posted felt like a dagger to her heart. The carefully curated shots showed them posing in front of iconic landmarks. Her mother and Rachel standing arm in arm under the Eiffel Tower, her father laughing over a wine tasting in Bordeaux, and the three of them enjoying a gondola ride in Venice. Amy's name was never mentioned, and her contribution to making the trip possible was conspicuously absent. Instead, the captions Rachel posted were filled with vague acknowledgments like, "A dream trip with the best people," and "Couldn't have done this without these two amazing humans." Amy found herself scrolling obsessively, refreshing their feeds to see the latest updates. The more she saw, the harder it was to suppress the growing anger and sadness swirling inside her. How could they act as though she didn't exist? How could Rachel, someone she had trusted for years, so easily step into a role that wasn't hers to claim? Rachel's betrayal felt especially personal. They had been best friends since high school, bonding over their shared love of art and dreams of traveling the world. Amy had always been there for Rachel, supporting her through every heartbreak and career setback. When Rachel's last relationship ended in disaster, a toxic spiral of lies and manipulation, she had invited Rachel to stay with her for weeks, giving her a shoulder to cry on and a safe space to heal. And this was the thanks she got? Unable to keep her frustration bottled up any longer, Amy decided to confront her parents. She dialed their number, her heart pounding as she waited for them to answer. When her father picked up, his voice was cheerful, almost annoyingly so. "Amy, how's my favorite daughter?" he said, as if everything were perfectly normal. "Hi, Dad," she said, forcing herself to sound calm. "I've been following your trip online. Looks like you're having a great time." "We are. Paris was incredible and Rome is even better. You should see the Colosseum." "It's breathtaking," Robert replied enthusiastically. "You really outdid yourself with this itinerary, kiddo." Amy swallowed hard. "I'm glad you're enjoying it, but I have to ask, why didn't you tell me you were bringing Rachel? It feels like I wasn't included in a decision that directly involves me." There was a brief pause before her father spoke again, his tone more reserved. "Oh, that. Well, your mom thought it would be nice to have someone else along. You know how close she is with Rachel. It just kind of happened." "It just kind of happened?" Amy repeated, her voice rising slightly. "Dad, I spent months planning this trip for you and Mom. It wasn't meant to be a group vacation." Her father sighed. Amy, we're grateful for everything you've done, truly. But Rachel's had a tough time lately and she needed a break. Your mom thought it wouldn't hurt to include her. Amy felt her chest tighten. So what I wanted didn't matter? That's not what I'm saying, Robert replied, his tone defensive. We didn't think you'd mind. You're always so busy with work. You wouldn't have been able to come with us anyway. Amy bit her lip, trying to hold back tears. That's not the point, Dad. It's about respect. You could have at least talked to me before making a decision like this. Her father sighed again, clearly growing impatient. Look, Amy, we're having a wonderful time. Can't you just be happy for us? We'll talk more when we get back. Before she could respond, the call ended. Amy stared at her phone, the familiar sense of being dismissed washing over her. Her parents' refusal to see her side of things only deepened the wound. It wasn't just about Rachel. It was about being excluded from something she had worked so hard to create. Later that evening, Amy decided to confront Rachel directly. She hesitated as she typed out the message, unsure of how to phrase her feelings without sounding accusatory. Finally, she settled on a neutral tone. Hey, Rachel. I've been seeing the posts from the trip. Can we talk about how you ended up going? I just feel a little blindsided. The reply came almost instantly. Of course. I'll call you in a bit. When Rachel called, her voice was filled with the same bubbly enthusiasm that had always made her so likable. Amy! Oh my gosh, isn't this trip amazing? Your parents are having the best time. Amy's stomach churned. Yeah, it looks incredible, but, Rachel, I can't lie. I'm struggling with how this all went down. I didn't know you were coming until after everything was booked. Rachel's tone shifted slightly, though she tried to keep it light. Oh, I totally get that. It was kind of last minute. Your mom mentioned how hard I'd been working and thought it would be a good idea. I wasn't sure at first, but she insisted. Amy frowned. Why didn't you tell me? You had to know how much effort I'd put into planning this. There was a pause, and for the first time Rachel sounded uncertain. I didn't think it would be a big deal. Your parents seemed fine with it, so I figured you'd be too. It is a big deal, Amy said, her voice trembling. I planned this for my parents, not for you. It feels like you've taken over something that wasn't yours to begin with. Rachel sighed. Amy, I'm sorry if it feels that way. I didn't mean to step on your toes, I don't know. I've been in a bad place lately, and your mom made it sound like I'd be helping by coming along. Amy's frustration boiled over. Helping? How is taking my place helping? Rachel didn't have an answer. The silence on the other end of the line spoke volumes. After the call ended, Amy felt more alone than ever. Her parents had dismissed her feelings, and now Rachel had offered a hollow apology that did little to address the real issue. It seemed like everyone had decided her role in the trip was irrelevant. For the next few days, Amy tried to focus on her work, but the constant stream of photos and updates from her parents and Rachel made it impossible to escape the betrayal. She felt trapped in a loop of anger, sadness, and confusion, unable to find a way forward. Little did Amy know, the worst was yet to come. As she dug deeper into the situation, she would uncover truths that would change her relationships and her sense of trust forever. The photos stopped abruptly. For a day, Amy felt relief. Perhaps they were finally too busy enjoying their vacation to post updates. But by the second day, the absence of posts felt peculiar. There were no updates, no messages, not even a reply to Amy's text asking how the trip was going. The eerie silence gnawed at her. Unable to focus, Amy tried calling her mother, but the call went straight to voicemail. She tried her father next, but the same thing happened. Her anxiety spiked. She told herself it was probably just poor reception or a packed itinerary, but a nagging thought at the back of her mind told her otherwise. To distract herself, Amy decided to review her finances. Since booking the trip, she had been meticulously tracking her expenses, ensuring her budget remained intact. As she logged into her banking app, she noticed a new charge on her credit card. $2,500 from a hotel in Rome. Confused, she clicked for more details. The date of the transaction coincided with her parents' second night in the city. Amy hadn't authorized this charge. She had prepaid for their accommodation in Rome, and there was no reason for additional expenses. Panic set in as she scrolled through her account history. More charges appeared, each one higher than the last. Eagle $1,200 for a private gondola ride, Eagle $1,200 for a wine and dining experience in Florence, and Eagle $110 for a suite upgrade in Barcelona. Her mind raced. How could this have happened? She had booked everything herself, down to the last detail. There was no room for these extra expenses, unless someone had access to her card. The realization hit her like a freight train. Rachel. Months ago, during Rachel's breakup, Amy had given her best friend access to her credit card for emergencies. It was a gesture of trust, a lifeline for someone she considered family. But now, it seemed that trust had been violated in the worst way. Amy immediately called her bank to report the unauthorized charges. As she waited on hold, her hands shook with a mix of rage and disbelief. How could Rachel do this to her? And why hadn't her parents said anything? The bank representative was sympathetic, walking Amy through the process of filing a dispute. But determined to get answers, Amy began digging deeper. She searched her parents' social media accounts for clues, but there were no new posts. Then she checked Rachel's profile. Her stomach turned as she saw a photo posted just hours earlier. Rachel lounging on a sun-drenched balcony, holding a champagne flute. The caption read, "Living the sweet life in Barcelona. Can't thank my amazing travel companions enough." Amy stared at the photo, her blood boiling. The suite upgrade, the one she hadn't authorized, was for Rachel. It was all too much. She dialed Rachel's number, her hands trembling as she pressed the call button. Rachel answered on the third ring, her voice bright and cheerful. "Hey, Em, what's up?" Rachel said, as though nothing was wrong. "What's up?" Amy echoed, her voice shaking. "I'll tell you what's up. I just found thousands of euros in unauthorized charges on my credit card. Care to explain?" There was a pause on the other end of the line, then a nervous laugh. "Oh, that. Yeah, about that. I was going to tell you. Your mom mentioned how amazing the suite upgrades were, and I thought it would be worth it. I mean, it's your parents' dream trip, right?" Amy was speechless for a moment, her mind reeling at Rachel's audacity. "Rachel, you used my credit card without asking me. That's fraud. You didn't even think to check if it was okay?" Rachel's tone shifted, becoming defensive. "Amy, calm down. It's not like I spent it on myself. This is for your parents. You're acting like I stole from you or something." "Because you did," Amy shouted, unable to contain her anger any longer. "You had no right to use my card, no matter what my parents said. And why didn't they tell me? Did they know about this?" Rachel hesitated, then said quietly, They might have suggested it, but they thought you wouldn't mind. They said you'd want them to have the best experience possible." Amy's head spun. Her parents had been complicit in this? The very people she had gone to such lengths to surprise and honor had betrayed her trust? The realization was almost too much to bear. "I can't believe this," Amy said, her voice trembling. "I trusted you, Rachel. I trusted all of you. How could you do this to me?" "Amy, I didn't mean to hurt you," Rachel said softly. "I thought I was helping. Your parents mean so much to me, and I just wanted to make this trip special for them." Amy felt tears welling up in her eyes. "This wasn't your trip to make special. It was mine. You had no right." She ended the call without waiting for a response. The betrayal felt like a physical weight pressing down on her chest. She wanted answers from her parents, but part of her was afraid of what they might say. Were they truly so thoughtless, or had Rachel manipulated them into thinking this was all okay? Amy decided she couldn't wait for them to return home. She composed an email to her mother, laying everything out in painstaking detail. She included screenshots of the unauthorized charges, links to Rachel's Instagram posts, and a heartfelt plea for an explanation. She sent the email. Hours passed with no response. Amy's anger simmered as she replayed every interaction in her mind, dissecting every word and gesture. How had she not seen this coming? Was she so blind to her parents' and Rachel's true nature? Finally, her phone buzzed with a notification. It was an email from her mother. Amy opened it with a mixture of hope and dread, her heart pounding as she read the words. "Amy, I'm sorry you feel this way, but I think you're overreacting. Rachel has been like family to us for years, and she only did what she thought was best. Yes, we suggested the upgrades, but we assumed you'd be okay with it. We didn't mean to hurt you, and we're sorry if you feel betrayed. Can we talk about this when we get home?" Amy stared at the screen, her jaw clenched in disbelief. There was no acknowledgement of wrongdoing, no real apology, just a dismissal of her feelings. The people she had sacrificed so much for had taken her generosity for granted, and then brushed off her pain as if it were an inconvenience. As she closed the email, Amy knew one thing for certain. Things would never be the same. This wasn't just a misunderstanding. It was a fundamental breach of trust that had shattered the foundation of her relationships. And as much as it hurt, she realized she couldn't let herself be treated this way anymore. The fallout from Amy's confrontation with Rachel and her parents left her emotionally drained, yet oddly determined. For years, she had been the person who forgave too easily, brushed aside her own feelings for the sake of maintaining peace. But this time was different. The betrayal had cracked something open inside her, a realization that she could no longer be the glue holding together relationships that only took from her without giving anything in return. In the days following the tense conversations, Amy threw herself into her work, using the precision of design to quiet the chaos in her mind. But the unresolved feelings refused to stay buried. Every night, she replayed the events in her head, dissecting every word and every action. The more she thought about it, the clearer it became that this wasn't just about the trip. It was about a pattern that had persisted throughout her life. Her parents had always loved her, but their love came with expectations. They had leaned on her emotionally, even as a child, treating her less like a daughter and more like a confidant. She had stepped into the role willingly, but now she saw how much it had cost her. She had learned to put others first, to suppress her own needs, because she believed that's what love required. And Rachel had been a mirror of those same dynamics, a friend who took more than she gave, who relied on Amy's generosity without ever truly reciprocating. Amy decided she needed space to process everything. She muted her parents' and Rachel's social media accounts, blocked Rachel's number, and gave herself permission to take a step back. At first, it felt like abandonment, as though she were shirking some unspoken duty. But with each passing day, the distance began to feel like freedom. Weeks turned into months, and life carried on. Amy focused on building her freelance business, pouring her energy into projects that brought her joy and fulfillment. She began taking long walks in the mornings, listening to podcasts about boundaries and self-worth. Slowly, she started to feel like herself again. Or perhaps, for the first time, she was discovering who she truly was. But the tension with her parents remained unresolved, and the weight of it hung over her like a cloud. Despite their apology, Amy sensed that they didn't fully understand the depth of her hurt. They had tried to smooth things over with small gestures, a bouquet of flowers, a handwritten note, but the underlying issues remained untouched. Amy knew that if she wanted things to change, she would have to take the lead. One evening she invited her parents over for dinner. The house was quiet as she prepared the meal, her hands trembling slightly as she set the table. When Anna and Robert arrived, they seemed hesitant, as though unsure of their welcome. Amy greeted them warmly but kept the conversation light as they sat down to eat. She needed to ease into the discussion, to find the right moment to address the elephant in the room. After dinner, as they lingered over coffee, Amy took a deep breath and began. "I'm glad you came tonight. I've been thinking a lot about everything that happened, and I feel like there's still so much we need to talk about." Her parents exchanged glances, and Anna nodded. "We've been waiting for you to say something, Amy. We didn't want to push." Amy appreciated the sentiment, but she couldn't help feeling a flicker of frustration. "I need to be honest with you. The trip wasn't just a gift. It was my way of saying thank you for everything you've done for me. It was supposed to be something special, something that showed how much I value you, but when you brought Rachel, it felt like you didn't value me in return." Anna looked down at her hands, her expression heavy with guilt. "We didn't mean for it to come across that way. We thought we were including someone you cared about. We didn't realize how much it would hurt you." "But that's the problem," Amy said, her voice soft but firm. "You didn't think about how it would affect me. You assumed I'd be okay with it, and when I wasn't, it felt like my feelings didn't matter." Robert sighed, leaning back in his chair. "You're right. We were selfish. We let our excitement get in the way of seeing the bigger picture, and when you called us out on it, we didn't handle it the way we should have." Amy nodded, her heart softening slightly at his words. "I appreciate you saying that, but I need you to understand that this isn't just about the trip. It's about a pattern. I've spent so much of my life putting other people's needs before my own, and I've realized that I can't keep doing that. I need boundaries. I need—" Anna reached across the table, her eyes glistening with tears. "We hear you, Amy, and we want to do better. We want to be the kind of parents who support you, not just in words but in actions." The sincerity in her voice brought tears to Amy's own eyes. For the first time in months, she felt a glimmer of hope, a sense that things could truly change. With her parents, the path to healing was gradual but steady. They made an effort to respect Amy's boundaries, checking in with her before making decisions that involved her. They began to prioritize open communication, and their relationship grew stronger as a result. Rachel, however, was a different story. Amy had hoped for more from her former best friend, but Rachel had made little effort to rebuild their friendship. In the end, Amy decided to let her go. It was painful, but it was also liberating. She realized that not every relationship could. As the months turned into a year, Amy found herself in a completely different place. She had built a thriving business, surrounded herself with supportive friends, and cultivated a sense of self-worth that no longer depended on others' approval. The betrayal that had once consumed her was now a distant memory, a lesson she carried with her as a reminder of her strength. One evening, as she sat on her balcony watching the sun dip below the horizon, Amy felt a profound sense of peace. The journey had been painful, but it had also been transformative. She had learned that love without respect is hollow, that boundaries are an act of self-care, and that sometimes the hardest thing you can do is walk away from people you love. And yet, as she sat there, she realized she had gained something far more valuable than what she had lost, a deep and unshakable trust in herself. For the first time, Amy felt truly free, not just from the weight of others' expectations, but from the limitations she had once placed on herself. And in that freedom, she found a kind of joy she had never known before.